So it's about that time at Green Pig Farm to give another tour of the garden. We have lots of great things going on. We've got some issues that you might experience. The reason I have my camera on the chickens is because they got into a bit of trouble last night. So last night, a moderate storm blew through. We had a lot of wind, we had some rain, we got maybe 1/10 of an inch. So it isn't the worst thing that could happen around here. The problem is that during the storm, their gate blew open, and these ladies took it upon themselves to walk into the garden for a new buffet. So the question that I'm going to answer for you is, should I allow my chickens in the garden? So let me take you over to the garden. These ladies walked out of their coop and probably about 50 feet over to the garden. Now, I had walked up here last night. It was dark, and I walked into the garden to make sure we didn't have any flooding, to make sure that the plants had sustained the wind, and I saw a little bit of a war zone. So if you don't know a whole lot about chickens, they are foragers. They will scratch and peck at the ground looking for beetles, grubs, ticks, anything that they find appetizing, which, if your garden isn't planted, it's fantastic. They will help by eating weed seeds, slugs, things that you don't want during an active garden. So I can't fully answer that question in one way. Should I allow chickens in my garden? It's a big no if your garden is planted up. You can see that the grass that I was using for mulch over top of newspaper, someone or several ladies thought they may have found something interesting, and they started tearing this up. Hopefully the cages deterred them a bit from the tomatoes. You can see that the tomatoes are still suffering from some stress. I have not figured out what is stressing them out. Giving them a little bit of nutrients, some TLC, holding back on pruning, but they're holding on for now. Here's probably the biggest piece of damage that my flock had done. I had this beautiful yellow squash plant, and I walked up here and I saw that this entire piece of the plant was broken off. So you can see there were several yellow squash forming. They broke off some additional leaves with more squash on it. So I'm left with this nub of a plant. I have no idea if it will survive. There are lots of male flowers on here. I do not see any female flowers with a quick glance. Oops, there we go. But I'm hoping that the damage that the chickens caused is not going to cause the death of the plant, because we've had a wonderful crop of yellow squash this summer. It doesn't appear as though they touched the beans very much. We've got a couple different types of beans here. We've got yellow beans in here. You can see that they are growing very nicely in here. We'll probably pick some today. We also have some green beans growing along here. What I'm most excited about this year are these trellises. You can see if I back up a little bit, most of the plants are over 6 feet high. They are working their way around the trellis. And you can see that now I will be picking things at my height or above my head. I just saw a bee flying around here. I come up here every morning, and it's the coolest thing to watch them do their thing, giving us tons and tons and tons of fresh veggies. We've got a watermelon up here. It is really slow this year. This is probably the biggest watermelon I see. It's the size of a grape. I have no idea if it will ripen on time, but check this out. We've got cucumber after cucumber after cucumber, and more coming. So when I post some freebies for cucumbers or any of our other produce, please take us up on it. We love to spread the love and help those of you out who would like some organic produce. So you can see we do have a couple other squash plants. They seem to be happy. We've got one here, one over here. I'm hoping that the chickens didn't break this one as well. We've been fighting powdery mildew, but perhaps with the chickens breaking the plants, it'll increase airflow. We won't have too much of an issue with the weather, and having started 90% of our plants from seed, we haven't picked a tomato yet. So we've got lots here. I did do some initial pruning. I don't know if these heirloom varieties did not like what I was doing, but you can see this poor guy hanging on, still green, but still letting me know that she's stressed out. You can see these leaves are curling. I thought at one point that it was some type of fungal or bacterial infection. I don't think that is anymore, but we are super excited to be able to harvest some tomatoes, talking about different recipes we're going to be using. So we just have to be patient, hope that the stress does not kill them, and we should be good to go in hopefully a couple weeks. We've got some big ones down here, some little ones, and again, I guess even if our one squash plant doesn't make it because of the chicken trauma, we should be okay. Over here is just the other side of the trellis. You can see the plants are fairly happy here, working their way up. I do come up here and try and train these guys just by putting their little tendrils close, trying to keep it somewhat organized. As the summer goes on, it's supposed to be upwards of 100 degrees today. Sometimes getting into the garden doesn't get on the top of the list, but overall things look pretty good here. Chickens didn't do a whole lot of damage here, I don't think. So they scratched up some of the mulch, which I will rake up. They broke one of the squash plants, but I would say the most heavily damaged, I'm guessing the chickens enjoyed something around the stevia. So they tore up this area. They found something that they liked. They ripped up all the grass here. The other thing that's really funny, and I don't know if any of you have chickens, we found out that our chickens find something enticing about the plastic plant tags. So whether it's something that's store-bought, or you can see over here when I came up last night, I was upset, but I had to giggle because every single plant tag that I had in the ground was graciously plucked up and out. So my chickens love things that are not edible, which is another thing you need to know. Chickens will eat almost anything in front of them. They will eat plastic. I did the mistake once of putting some leftovers on a styrofoam plate, being a nice chicken mom, and not only did they eat the leftovers, they ate almost the entire styrofoam plate. Oh, looks like over here they knocked over one of the cayenne pepper plants, but I should be able to just put a cage around that, stake it up. We are getting a lot more activity in here. This is super fun. We've got, I believe they moved the tag. I believe these are either YOLOs or they are banana peppers. So I'll have to review one of my previous videos to make sure that I am speaking correctly. But again, their damage, they had lots of fun. I can thank them for aerating, and again, maybe they got some slugs and bugs that shouldn't have been around here, but not exactly what I was hoping to do today. You can see that they couldn't really get into the Brussels sprouts. It's pretty densely packed. We won't be picking these guys, I don't think, for another couple of months, but you can see, hopefully, that the Brussels sprouts are forming rather nicely. In the next week or so, I will be pulling up the broccoli here. We did harvest a couple pounds. Not the best harvest, but I've let these go because you can get some, I call them side heads, auxiliary heads. So after you cut that first bit of lettuce, or I'm sorry, not lettuce, silly me. After you cut that first head of broccoli, you'll get these smaller little florets. So I've been gathering those for now. I will probably plant our fall crop in the next couple of weeks. So on the outskirts here, doesn't look like they damaged our eggplant. They have been really slow growing. Again, I planted these, I started them from seed. They came out here really small. I'm assuming they're like the peppers and like hot weather. I had some extra space, so I threw in a few more green beans. You can see I need a little bit more weeding to be done, but There's never enough time for that. I'm really proud of this guy. I started celery from seed, and I read that it was extremely hard to do so. So I planted 12 seeds. I germinated 3 or 4, and by the time it was time to plant, I had about 2. I brought 2 out here. We had a pretty significant storm, and the storm washed away one of the very small seedlings. So this one's still holding on. It's my pride and joy. The funny thing is, I don't even like celery, but I was up for the challenge of trying to see what I could do, see what we liked, see what produced really well. This has been in since before Mother's Day weekend, so at least for me, it's a really slow grower. I did throw in some green zucchini here, so that hopefully once the yellow summer squash slow down a bit, we have some other options. My little weed patch here, this did have some spinach, and I planted a cat here. This is Crackle, walking through, wanting to be a celebrity with me. I planted the kale and the spinach too late in this patch. So I do have some space here. I've been really conflicted on what to put in here, but I'll think about it for a little bit. It's really the only open space that we have so far. The basil really took off. I've been trying to take any of the flowering heads. I was gifted some chives that I've planted. They've really grabbed. And I forgot to mention, I planted some butterfly weed, also known as milkweed. This is the only food source for monarch butterflies. So when I walked up here and I was getting ready to shoot the video, there was a monarch feeding, which I was really excited about. I was hoping that she would encourage some of her friends to come, because a garden is lovely to look at. There's lots of green. You can see I've also planted some flowers up here to attract pollinators and to help with soil content and whatnot. But it's really a lovely place to be when you've got birds chirping, you've got bees buzzing, you've got butterflies sporting their pretty colors. So really, one of the things that I've done this year is put some pretty in my garden. If I'm going to spend time up here, I want to look at some pretty colors. Here's some other significant damage from the chickens. For whatever reason, the few onions that I have left, they decided that they wanted to get in here and make a complete mess, so I will be raking this up soon. They got into the cauliflower, pushed away some of the mulch here, broke off some of the bottom leaves here. I'm not too worried. This was my first time planting cauliflower, and we literally got nothing. You can see that the weather just wasn't right. The heads kind of separated, even though I had been blanching the cauliflower. It just was not a worthwhile endeavor here. So not sure if I'll be planting them for fall. See if I can try again. I don't want to just judge on just one. You can see we had a pretty lovely harvest of some red acre cabbage. I've got a couple more heads here going. We had some issues with slugs, which was never fun. I am leaving these here because you can see, just like the broccoli, once you harvest that main central head, you get these, let's see, right here. You get these little side heads, and I plucked them off. They remind me of Brussels sprouts. So I figured I'd let these go for another week or two and see what happens. We've got our second round of red beets, which it looks like the chickens also enjoyed. So I've got some row cleanup to do here. These are growing really well here. We love them. I've got some down in a raised bed as well. Like to see what they would do. A little bit of a compost pile going on, although one of our upcoming projects is going to be to build a compost bin. Back here, asparagus has been in the fern stage for quite some time. The cats love it up here. It gives them some shade, but not a whole lot going on here. I did plant some strawberries in here, and with the weeds, which if you have any recommendations on how to keep the weeds down in the asparagus patch, please feel free to share, because I haven't figured it out yet. I did have some grass clippings around, but because these are perennial, I don't want to discourage growth for next year. So in the fall, these will be all cut down. You can see that some of them start to brown. So when they all brown, these will be cut down. We'll put a thick layer of mulch for the winter, and then come spring we will uncover it. They are one of the first things that we get to harvest from the garden. So last but not least, this is pretty sad. We had a beautiful row of ever-bearing raspberries, and we had so much. We were picking gallon bags of raspberries last year. We made raspberry jam, we made raspberry desserts, but it got to the point that the plants were overgrown, they were falling over. It was extremely difficult to manage all the thorns. So we thought it was best to start over. These are perennial as well. So we cut them to the ground, and the plan was this year to make a trellis. Oh, and I'm distracted here. You can see, look at this guy. We've got another beautiful monarch butterfly. It's just awesome to see that he or she is able to get her food here. I wonder if it's the same one from earlier today. So again, this is butterfly weed, different than butterfly bush. Butterfly bush is invasive. Butterfly weed is perennial. So if you want to have more bang for your buck in your garden, get some of this. These were just very small stalks. They seem to really enjoy the heat as well. They are very low maintenance. They don't need much fertilizer, but they are giving food to the monarchs. So I hope that we can encourage lots of them to come around to the farm. Anyway, back to what I was saying. We cut all of these raspberries down to the ground, and we're going to start fresh this year, build a nice trellis. And it has been a very difficult year. Like I said, with the tomato plants undergoing some stress. Something's been going on with the raspberries as well. Several plants have been doing okay, growing kind of slowly. Some of the plants will die and come back. So we're just going to let them do their thing for a while and see what happens. We have a lot going on this year. We've doubled the size of our garden from last year. So there's only so much we can do. These will come back next year, so if there's some kind of adjustment we need to do, perhaps evaluate the soil that they're planted in, although I find it hard to believe that last year they were growing so beautifully and something drastically changed with the soil. So last but not least, we have this packed area of the garden. All of these tomato plants and then some are volunteers, which means we had a few tomato plants planted here last year. And if a tomato falls on the ground and it decomposes, it leaves some seeds behind. So these just started growing on their own. I have no idea what kind they are, but they're actually doing rather well. We've got these beautiful clumps. I'm really hoping for some heirloom colored tomatoes. I had white tomatoes planted here last year. I had purple tomatoes planted here last year. So we will see when things start ripening. Hopefully I'll be able to name what I have here. We had Paul Robeson last year. We had, I think they were called White Queen tomatoes here. But again, it will be a surprise. So, in summary, do I let my chickens in the garden? Once we rip all of this out, I have no problem sharing my space with chickens. They can forage, they can aerate the soil, they can get rid of all of those pests that we don't want in our garden. They even will go after ticks, which helps us humans and pets. But during the active season, if you let your chickens into your garden, they will not differentiate. They will eat your tomatoes, they will destroy your mulch, they will knock over plants. So during the growing season, it is a big no-no. On the off season, or if you have a chicken tractor where you can designate them to just one area, absolutely have at it.